Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the second of two talks entitled Wearing Out Your Meditation Cushion, or How to Establish and Maintain a practice, a Buddhist practice. I'm in charge of the technology this evening, as much as it will let me. If you want to ask questions at any time, do please raise a hand on Zoom, or you can type questions into the chat box, and I will ask them of Neckman Ordon at some appropriate moment. So over to you.
Thank you. So good evening, everybody. What we're aiming to achieve is a daily practice specifically of silent sitting, because in some ways it's quite easy to maintain general Buddhist practice, that is Buddhist practice that includes ritual. But to maintain a practice that is just silent sitting seems to be more challenging. That's what we found from our experience of meeting with people and having students and talking to people on open retreats over the last 30 or 40 years, that it's that maintaining the practice of silent sitting that seems to be the difficult thing. So that's what we're looking at. And last time we looked at how it's something that will help is setting up a place to practice. So there's always a place that is ready for you, or that is very easy to turn into your place of meditation very quickly. So it might be a cupboard you open, or a curtain that you pull across, or a folder that you open and stand up in front of you, and your cushions, you've worked out what's your comfortable sitting position, so your cushion or your chair, they're there ready for you. And that will help you to overcome those basic obstacles of where do I sit, how do I sit. We talked about how long to sit, but we didn't really talk about when to sit. So I'm going to say a little bit about that now. Traditionally, first thing in the morning is said to be the best time for meditation. This is because the mind is clearer and brighter in the morning, and also in terms of people like ourselves who are Gokar Changlo practitioners, so that we're people who are committed to the path of Buddhism, but we live in the ordinary world. We're not monastics, we're not withdrawn from the ordinary world. So particularly for us, it's important to be able to practice before the busyness of the day starts to crowd in on the quiet mind that is there when you first wake up. However, people are very different. People are very different in their biological clocks, and also different in terms of their daily commitments. And so we have to work within those and be practical and realistic about working within those. So if, for example, you're going to be woken very early by a young child, then first thing in the morning may not be a practical time of day to sit. It may be that if you are going to get up before your child, that is going to be ridiculously early and untenable, especially if your child's not very good at going to bed at the other end of the day. So then you will have to find a way to fit it into your life at other times. Perhaps you work shifts, and some of those shifts mean you're either home from work very late or you have to be into work very early. So that might mean that first thing in the morning is not a good time. Or perhaps you're a person like me, who is just not a morning person. I find it quite difficult to get up early. I do discipline myself to get up earlier than I used to. Surprisingly, I've succeeded in this since we retired, but I'm not naturally a morning person. And so for me, I find that I have to engage in some sort of physical practice before I start a sitting practice when I first get up. Because if I go from my bed, having had a quick wash and whatever, to my sitting cushion, it's too close to my sleep time and I will just get sleepy. It just doesn't work for me. So I usually practice a little bit of walking meditation or some kumye, something that's a bit more physical, and I have a cup of coffee. And then that means I can then enter into my practice and stay quite alert and present. So really, it's a matter of working with how you are as an individual. When the children were young and I had to get them to school for, I think they were quite early, about 8:30. I'm pretty sure that's not early relative to our European colleagues. I think your children go to school very early, but that was quite early for me. And so that meant I had to be up early enough to feed them and get them ready and everything. So I didn't sit for all those years that the children were young and needing me there in the morning. I didn't sit first in the morning. And for me, early afternoon has always been quite a good time to sit. And strangely, I quite like sitting last thing at night in the dark. I find that can be quite an interestingly clear space. So there are no hard and fast rules about the time to sit. I think there are factors to argue for first thing in the morning before the busy day has started that for many, many people will function as a sensible approach. But you may, depending on your life circumstances, have to work with that a little and be flexible or creative in terms of how that works for you. Now, last time I mentioned this 10 minutes a day thing, and I want to stress that this idea of establishing a 10 minutes a day practice, that this is a bottom line. 10 minutes a day is not sufficient to really make progress in your practice. But in terms of establishing a daily practice that functions on a daily schedule, it becomes part of your daily routine that you practice. It's quite useful to set this 10 minutes as your bottom line. So that means you practice 10 minutes of meditation even if you're ill. You practice 10 minutes of meditation even if you were up all night with somebody who was sick. You practice your 10 minutes of meditation on your birthday, on the day you get married, on the day your children get married. You practice your 10 minutes of meditation on the day somebody close to you dies. You practice your 10 minutes of meditation on the day you're on holiday, when you're on holiday and you're out on the beach. When you're traveling and you're traveling overnight and you don't even get to sleep that night. If you set that as your bottom line, that will actually make it much easier when life is more normal, when life is just going along in its normal way, to then build your meditation practice. Because you have established this very strong foundation of 10 minutes a day, whatever, then from that base, you can then, in normal circumstances, make that period of meditation longer. But if you haven't got that strong base, then it can be quite difficult to build up the meditation sessions in any sort of constructive, continuing, developing way. What tends to happen if you haven't got that bedrock of a minimum period is that you'll just go for it now and then, like you'll do an hour and you perhaps feel guilty because you haven't done any meditation for 3 or 4 days. So you set yourself up and you're going to do an hour the next day. And that sort of sporadic approach is actually in the end going to be less successful than having a small daily basic foundation that you can build on. And the thing about having that daily foundation is that you're setting yourself up to succeed. You can call yourself a successful meditator because you have established that. And once you have established that, you can let go of any sense of, oh, I really should be practicing, or I'm a naughty person because I'm part of this lineage and I know I should be practicing Shine and I'm not, and all that rada stuff that goes on. If you have even 10 minutes a day that you do every day, whatever's going on in your life, then you can develop that Vajra pride, that quality of respecting yourself as a committed practitioner who is maintaining a committed practice. And from maintaining that committed practice in ordinary circumstances, when life isn't too overly demanding, you can then build that up to 20 minutes a day, or half an hour a day, or an hour a day if you can get to that. That would be the ideal, would be a minimum of an hour a day. But if you always have this 10-minute commitment to fall back to, the days that you don't manage that, you don't have to feel a failure because you've sat and practiced your silent sitting in some form for some period of time. You have maintained your commitment. So hopefully that is clear, that is the point of the have you had your 10 a day. Nobody is saying that 10 minutes a day is enough to make real progress, but it is enough to register as committed. It is enough to hold that personal integrity in terms of your daily practice. So I'm a sip of water.
Are there any questions at this point? Not yet.
Okay. Now, something that Nakula often says, he's worried now, is that there's no such thing as a bad meditation session. And I think he's absolutely right there, especially if you're maintaining this 10 minutes baseline and you're practicing more than 10 minutes a day. Because it's extraordinary how we vary from day to day. Some days we can be extremely clear and focused. Other days we may be dozing all the way through. Some days the thoughts about the day, about life, things that are worrying you, other things in your life that you have to get on with can really impinge on your daily practice. But if you have maintained your basic commitment, then you don't need to worry about that because there's always tomorrow. This is the wonderful thing about a daily practice. Ultimately, it doesn't matter what today's practice was like because there's always tomorrow's practice. The important thing is that you were there. You were in your chair, you were on your cushion, and you were attempting to engage in silent sitting. That is a successful practice. Whatever was going on in that practice, that is a success. So I don't know if Westerners are particularly bad for this, but we seem to have a tendency to be rather self-critical, and we beat ourselves up about things, and oh, I'm not doing enough, and my practice isn't any good, and everybody else looks so blissful and I'm struggling. And it's probably that everybody else is exactly the same as you. So hold that integrity, hold that commitment to your baseline, whatever you set your baseline at, and maintain that every day. And then you don't have to worry about the individual practice session, and you don't have to worry about what anybody else is doing. It's not a competition. All you do is you build on that day by day by day. Some days will be a good session, some days not so good. But really, how can we judge what is good and what is not good? Sometimes the days that we've struggled can later on filter through to a day that something kind of got worked out, that if you kept letting go but stuff kept coming up and you just struggled and you struggled and you stayed with it, then although that particular session may not have felt very successful, the very fact that you continued is something to build on, and you will find that the benefits of sticking with it in that way will grow over time. Still no questions? Okay, so the practice that the silent sitting practice in the Arate lineage, where everybody begins, is called Shine. And this is a practice of remaining uninvolved. But you will find these type of practices in all the schools of Buddhism, in all the countries where there is Buddhism. Sometimes they are regarded as the practice that the professionals do. So they're the practices that the monks and the nuns do, and the lay community of Buddhists won't necessarily practice them. But from the perspective of Westerners who have chosen to be Buddhists, then you will start with these sort of practices. So Western practitioners tend to be committed to actually engaging in practice in a way that people who are brought up culturally Tibetan may not necessarily be engaged. So this in itself is a good thing. This is something to celebrate right from the beginning, that you're engaged and you're wanting to practice. Now, once you start to practice, whatever your style of silent sitting practice is, you will start to have experiences. And these experiences are called nyams. And a nyam, the word nyam translates as simply as meditational experience. And these can be nyams to do with the body, to do with any of the sense fields, or to do with ideation, to do with conceptual mind. And they tend to fall into three categories. So they might be weird, worrying, or wonderful. And those three relate to the root misconceptions of indifference, aversion, and attraction. So first of all, the weird ones. These are peculiar experiences that often occur in terms of the sense fields. And these experiences, you don't have any particular emotional reaction to them. So you don't dislike them and you don't like them. You just think that's weird. They're just odd. So, for example, one that I used to have a lot when I first started meditating, and I'm mostly our students here, so they'll all have heard this before, but one I used to have was I would be sitting with my eyes closed or mostly closed, and I'd feel as though my body was like this, or I better do it in that direction, that my body was at a strange angle. And I'd open my eyes and I'd find that I was still sitting perfectly upright. I'd go back to the meditation practice, and again, I'd feel as though I was like this. So that is a nyam. It's just peculiar. It didn't upset me. It didn't interest me particularly. It was just there. It was just something that happened. You may have a scent suddenly arise, or you may hear something, or it could be anything. And it's just weird. There's nothing particular about it in terms of an emotional response to it. So when we're practicing Shine, we just let it go. We don't engage with it. We don't analyze it. We don't try and get rid of it. We don't try and encourage it. We just continue to let go of whatever arises in the mind. But we can, just for a moment, have a little celebration that we had a nyam, which is a sign that we are meditating. The fact that we have, that a nyam has arisen is a sign that there is practice. It is a sign that the psychophysical system, that the elements are starting to relax towards their natural condition. So it's a sign of progress in practice. The second category are the worrying nyams, and these are connected with the root misconception of aversion. Now, I'm lucky that I haven't ever really had any worrying nyams. I think the nearest I've got to a worrying nyam would be feelings of nausea. And I think they're borderline peculiar or weird. So I'm not entirely sure. Have you ever had a worrying, like an aversion nyam? Because I think I've heard that people can have frightening images or very strong emotions that worry them or frighten them or make them feel very angry, or those sort of things. Is there a question?
Yes, from Dreamy. She asks, how would a weird nyam look like in ideation?
Well, I think the way to identify a weird nyam is, does it worry you, or do you think it's wonderful? If it worries you, then it's not weird. Well, it might still be weird, but it's probably more in that category of it's connected to aversion. And if you like it, if you quite like it to hang around, then it's going to be more connected to attraction. But if it's just something and you don't have any emotional response to it, then that's likely to be weird. So it might be a weird thought or an idea that comes into your mind, but you can very easily let it go. Does that answer that, or is there something more?
Just ask it, thank you. I wonder how it would be different to just have a weird thought instead of having a weird nyam of ideation. So I tend to have weird thoughts, and I would let go anyway, wouldn't I? So
yes, I mean, I'm not sure it's necessary to identify whether it's a nyam or it's just a weird thought. I think really for it to be a nyam, it's more sensory than ideation. I think if it's a weird thought, then just let it go and don't worry about whether it's a nyam or not. But I think it's things that seem quite potent, but completely irrelevant to how you are in that moment.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that you wanted to say
something. I was just thinking that sometimes a thought arises that is outside your normal pattern of thought and seems to have come from somewhere else. And something just pops up and disappears again. So it can be within the realm of ideation, but it follows no logical structure, and is not something you've ever considered before, that sort of thing. Things like that can happen.
I think also that the mind is naturally creative, and it could be said to be a nyam, the way you get your best ideas when you're meditating and you're not supposed to be thinking. I mean, I'm sure you've all had that, especially if you're working on a project. If I'm writing a book, it's like suddenly I'm meditating, and it's like, whoa, yeah, I really need to write that down. And there's this sort of creative quality. So in a sense, you could say that those are nyams of ideation, because the mind has settled, this creative quality is there, and you just have to let them go. Okay. So nyams that are worrying, as I was saying, I think I'm fortunate that I've never really had worrying nyams, but I think these could again appear in the sense fields. Perhaps it would be pain, or emotional or physical pain occurring, or some very frightening memories coming up, or something like that. And again, we just let them go. We don't engage with them. We don't regard them as important when they're happening, or more significant because they have occurred while we're meditating. They're a sign that the psychophysical elements are relaxing, and because they're relaxing, they're not so tightly coiled into the control that we usually place on all of that. So they are a reflection of you. They're not different to you. And so if they frighten you, it's not something outside of you that is frightening you. I think that's quite important to understand. They are an aspect of your natural manifestation, and they're manifesting because you are giving yourself that space of relaxation, and suddenly they can manifest. So again, just let them go, regard them as a sign that you're practicing, but don't try and force them out, because one thing that you'll learn quite quickly once you establish a daily practice is that the mind cannot be forced. You can't force thought in, you can't force thought out. And similarly, anything that arises through meditation practice, if you don't like it, you're not going to be able to force it out. You just have to continue with the method, and the method is letting go. And I think these sorts of nyams gradually reduce as your practice becomes stronger. Certainly I don't seem to get nyams in the same way that I used to. Would you agree?
Yeah, yeah.
That the quality of practice changes as you practice more and more. I certainly don't feel like I'm sitting like this anymore when I'm practicing. That hasn't happened for quite a good few years now. And so then the wonderful nyams. Now, in some ways, these are the most problematic. These are the biggest obstacle for a practitioner, because we want to keep these wonderful nyams. They're feelings of ecstasy, feelings of great joy, might be a vision, or feelings of light and clarity, and those sort of wonderful feelings. But the thing is that once we grasp at them, then we've changed them from being a meditation experience into into some, we've concretized them through grasping them and sort of defined them in some sort of way. And of course, because we've done that, they therefore dissolve. The way that that experience arose was through letting go, was through the practice of Shine, through allowing the mind to settle. So when a nyam that is wonderful arises, if you grasp at it, one of the dangers is you might think it's the realized state. It might be the realized state, but if you're practicing Shine, you still let it go. This is where the expression, if you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him, comes into play. This was by a 9th century Zen practitioner whose name I can't remember. It's in Battle Cry Freedom if you want to look it up. He said, if you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him. And this means that if you have this extraordinary vision of clarity and bliss and joy and wonder when you're practicing, if the practice is to let go, then you let that go as well. Because if you don't let that go, if you enter into that believing that that is the realized state, then you have actually entered a cul-de-sac. You have this path laid out in front of you, and this path is something comes in, you let it go, something comes in, you let it go, something comes in, you let it go. But if this wonderful thing comes in and you look at it and you think, oh, wow, that's amazing, and you go off and then you're stuck in this cul-de-sac, this cul-de-sac of wonder. But of course, that wonderful thing doesn't remain anyway. It changes, it dissolves, it goes away. But the danger then is that when you're meditating next time, you're trying to find that cul-de-sac. You're trying to get back in there. I want that wonderful experience that was there. And your practice of letting go is actually lost. And you'll never find that experience again because you didn't get there by looking for it. In fact, you got there by not looking for it. You got there by simply allowing the mind to settle. So what you experienced there was maybe a moment of what it might be like to be farther down the path. Maybe you had a hint of suddenly arising at some quality of realization, some quality of presence, some quality of enlightenment sparkling through the fabric of duality. But if you dwell on it and you seek it, you won't be able to move into that space again because you've abandoned the method. So you must never abandon the method. The path is the priority. So you kill the vision of the Buddha and you remain on the path. Any questions? So we'll now talk about the practice of Shine itself. In our tradition, in the Aratea lineage, Shine is always the practice where we begin. So we begin with Shine, and we may stay with the practice of Shine for many years. In fact, we may never stop practicing Shine because there's always, it's always worth starting with a few moments just to see how settled the mind is before engaging in other practices. So the practice of Shine is letting go. It's remaining uninvolved is the translation of the word Shine. And this is a very simple practice, and it's very difficult because it's so simple. That's one of the things that makes it so difficult. The posture for Shine is to try and encourage quietness and settledness. So the hands are placed on your lap with the upper hand, the right hand on top of the left hand. And the eyes, the chin is slightly tucked in, and the eyes are either closed or just open enough to let light in. And first of all, you use your breathing as a focus. So you bring your attention to the breathing, and you particularly notice the out breath. Now you can count the out breaths. How much form you need will depend on how you are as an individual, and only you can judge this. You can focus on the mere awareness of the breath, remaining in the empty space at the out breath. So you breathe in, you breathe out, and you let go of whatever's in the mind, whatever's namtogs are arising, and you dwell in that empty space at the end of the out breath. You breathe in, you breathe out, and let go, and find that space. You breathe in, you breathe out, and let go, and find that space. And then you don't really notice the in-breath, but you just continue to notice the space at the end of the out-breath. And then eventually you don't even notice the breath, you just find the space. And whenever something arises that takes you away from the focus in that space, then you just let it go. You either let it go without a focus of form, or you return to breathing it away. Now, if this is insufficient form for you to be able to maintain your concentration, then you can count the out breaths. So you count each and every out breath. I always say this now because we, a couple of times on open retreats when we've taught Shine, we've had people say to us, because the count is up to 21, I can't get to 21 in a breath. It's not in a breath, you're counting 21 breaths. So you breathe in and breathe out, that's 1. You breathe in, breathe out, that's 2, and so on. And you count the breaths up to 21, and then you count from 21 back down to 1. Now that can take a surprisingly long time to count 21 breaths. And if you can remain with the count without losing it in any way for 21 up and 21 down, then that shows a very good quality of concentration. And if you are able to do that, then you're probably ready to drop the count. But what happens certainly for beginners is that the count is continually lost. Now, that isn't to say that if a thought arises, you have to start again. I think this is also a misunderstanding of the purpose of the count. If a namtog arises, but you are with the count, you're aware that you've had a thought, but you haven't lost the count, then you can carry on with the count. It's only when you actually lose it that you need to start again at 1. Because at this stage, we're not going to be able to completely count up to 21 and back down to 21 if we're a beginner without something arising in the mind, because our normal experience is that the mind is continually namtogs, things that move in the right mind happen continually, whether they're thoughts, memories, emotions, ideas, whatever they are. So it's whether you can maintain the count and let go while maintaining the count, that you're not getting lost in these thought stories. When you need to return to one is when you realize you've actually been wandered off in that thought for a while and you've no idea where you are in the count. So you've either lost the count completely, or you've somehow held on to the number, but you don't anymore know whether you're going up to 21 or from 21 back down to 1. When that sort of thing starts to happen, that's when you need to start again at 1.
I have a question. A question from Anna. It seems that my mind has become very skilled at following my thoughts while maintaining the counting, multitasking. I can easily get to 21 while following loads of thoughts. Do you have any suggestions?
My goodness. You can get up to 20, you'll have to reply. Can you get up all the way up to 21, counting the breaths and all, not just counting, but counting the actual out breaths, and then all the way back down to 1? We can't hear you, you're on mute.
Sorry, we can't, yes.
Sorry, I'm just out walking the dog while listening. I hope that's okay. Yeah, I just feel like my mind is so good at multitasking that I can hold the count and then I won't even realize that I'm following a thought. And suddenly I'm following the thought, but I'm still counting. So I kind of I almost gave up on the counting. So I thought, oh, it feels a bit pointless, but then I still can't.
Can I just clarify, when you say I'm still counting, are
Yeah.
you actually counting the out breaths, or are you just counting?
Yeah, no, counting the out breaths.
I have never experienced anyone able to do that before. Sorry, I'm looking at the screen. I should be looking.
Yeah, I've just got a good mind at multitasking. But it makes it quite hard I feel like at the moment I'm just going through the whole session without having a moment between the thoughts that are coming. And sometimes I'll let them go, but often I'll follow them and I just feel like I'm drowning in a sea of thoughts.
Okay. Have you tried holding on empty for a few moments? Actively holding on an empty breath. So breathe in, breathe out, and remain there without breathing, and really focus on that space before you then breathe in again.
I haven't tried that, but that sounds like it would be really good.
But I believe you're a student of Natma Maitsal and Jagya. It would be good to talk to them about this because they are your teachers. So really they're the people to address personally about your practice. So that would be my suggestion if you were my student or our student. But please do check with them because they may have more experience than us as somebody having that quite amazing capability, and they may be able to offer some other suggestion.
Thank you. Yeah, I hadn't quite realised it was an issue till I heard you speak. Yeah, and I thought, yeah, maybe I should be able to. Yeah, it's not quite right, I think. But thank you so much.
Okay. I think it's important to say that we mustn't get into this state of thinking thought is naughty, that namtogs arising in the mind are naughty, because they're not. They're the natural function of mind. And so if there is focus and there is awareness and you're not getting lost in the thoughts, then that could be quite an interesting thing to explore what's going on there. But I think in answer to your question personally, I think you should talk to your teachers about that. I think that's something you need to explore with them on a very personal level of talking about your practice in depth. So I hope that's okay. So where was I? Oh yes, counting. Now, again, this is quite, it's important. And I think this question from Anna shows how important this is, to realize that we are all incredibly individual. Now, for me, counting never really functioned very well in terms of improving my practice. It certainly showed me how rubbish I was in the early years of maintaining any focus. But for me, it just became incredibly irritating, this count, that, oh God, I've got to start again. And I just got really frustrated with it. And I came to really dislike the counting the breath. And again, it's important to have a teacher that you can talk to about these things, because your teacher can make your practice fit you as an individual. And for me, this focusing on the end of the out breath and the space at the end of the out breath proved to be a much more useful practice than counting the breaths, because it seemed to give me the opportunity of really letting go and be empty, whereas trying to hold this count was kind of getting in the way of letting go and empty. Having said that, I do still occasionally, not every session, but sometimes I start a session with counting the breath, just to see how that is now, to see that I can easily maintain a count up to 21 and back down to 1. And there is that focus of the mind. So you can work with this and see how you are individually, because we are all individuals and we'll have different ways. Is there another question?
I just want to say 10 minutes.
Oh, thank you. So that is Shine with form. So you use the breath as a focus, either counting the breath or the merest awareness of the breath. And you simply let go of whatever is in the mind. And this is a practice that may take years and years and years of working on. It can be both an incredibly frustrating and an incredibly boring practice. But if you are able to stick with it, then eventually you will find a space called stable Shine. And stable Shine is where you are present, you are focused, the mind is alert and vivid, but there are no namtoks arising. Or if there are namtoks arising, they're the merest hint of them. It's like they start, but they never get going. So it's the merest hint that maybe something could arise, but they're not, they don't arise. So you just dwell in this space. Now, I've often likened this space to a particular type of puzzle. I'm not sure if these puzzles are popular anymore, so maybe it might not mean anything to you. But there used to be a craze for these sort of 3D puzzles where you had to put your focus in a particular strange cross-eyed position and look at this, what looked like just blobs and colour. And if you could get your focus right, suddenly there was a 3D image there and you go, oh, it's a rabbit, or oh, it's a whatever. And the interesting thing was that once you've got the focus right, you could look at that image and you could look round it with this strange focus of your eyes. So you could see that there was a tree in the background and, oh, look, there's some Easter eggs in front of, I remember a particular one about a rabbit. There's some Easter eggs at the bottom here and all this, that and the other. And you could actually stay in that focus and look around this picture. And then suddenly you lost the focus, it was gone again. And I think stable Shine is a little bit like that, that you're not there, you're not there, you're not there. I'm there. And suddenly the mind is clear and empty and focused, and you're just there. And you can stay there until you think, oh, I did it, and then you've lost it. And that is the nature of our minds. But once you've found it once, then you can find it again, and your practice will grow on that once you have experienced that space of mind without thought. But mind without thought is not the ultimate aim, even though it may appear to be so from the way that some of the teachings present the fruit of practice as emptiness. Discovering this state of emptiness, this state of stabilized shine, is a stage. It's not a natural state. It's a state that it is very valuable to discover. But the next stage on from discovering that state is actually to dissolve it and to move into Latong. But I'm not going to say anything about Latong tonight, because this is about establishing a practice rather than saying too much about the practice itself. So for the last 5 minutes, I'm just going to talk about ways to help you stay with the practice once you have got your baseline of however minutes a day that is, that you maintain whatever your life circumstances. So these practices are working with body, the sphere of intangible appearance, so that's speech and voice and vision, and then mind, a spacious quality. And some of them are very basic and simple, and others may require a little bit more practice to get used to. So the very simplest and most basic ones that we were taught were ones of body. And this will help with distraction or sleepiness, depending on which way you do it. And this is the way the mind tends to go. The mind either becomes sleepy because you're settling the mind down, you're letting go, you let go, you let go, you let go, you let go, you fall asleep. The mind goes in that direction. Or alternatively, you're trying to let go and the mind's going mad. You're trying to let go and the mind's going mad. You try and you try and you try, and the mind just gets busier and busier and busier. So it tends to go in those two directions. So we have to find the space in the middle of that where we can let go in a relaxed manner and discover that vividness. So if you're tending towards being sleepy, then this very simple practice is that you jerk your head up 3 times. Now be careful if you've got any problems with your neck, you maybe shouldn't do that. And maybe I shouldn't have put this thing in my hair today. But so you put your chin on your chest and you just bring your head up sharply. You do that 3 times and that lifts your energy. And then you just return to your practice. Or if your mind's so busy and full and frantic and you can't settle down, you do the opposite. You start with your head back and just bring it sharply down onto your chest. And then you go back to your practice. So that's very simple, takes a very short period of time, and it's not going to get in the way of anybody else's practice if you're practicing with other people. It raises the energy or it settles the energy. Now, the practice of voice is to sound the syllable ah. Ah is the Dzogchen primordial symbol, and I'm sorry, I should have organized the screen, but never mind, I haven't done that. You can look this up. If you look up the Dzogchen ah, you'll find those all over the web, no problem there. The Tibetan syllable ah. So you sound this ah for the length of an out breath. enter the dimension of the sound of making that R sound, the sound itself and the quality of making the sound. And you make that your focus and let go of anything else that's going on. And that will focus you, and then you return to your practice. And then the practice at the level of mind is that you visualize this white syllable R. It's visualized about the size of a fist, an arm lengths away, just above eye level. And it's in an opalescent sphere. So you visualize that R there. You focus on it very strongly. It's vividly white, the R. It's radiating bright white light. You focus on it. And when the mind feels clear, then you just return to your practice. Now, there's also a practice called Vajra posture, which combines physical visualization elements. And this posture is described in 2 books, Roaring Silence and Shock Amazement, books by Ngak'chang Rinpoche and Khandro Deychen. But this is a posture that you need to be cautious about if you have any physical problems, problems with the heart, problems with blood pressure, problems with your back, those sorts of things. But this head one, you should be able to do unless you have severe problems with your neck. So these are simple ways to bring you back to your practice. So then you can continue with the practice of letting go. So a very brief summing up, because we've run out of time. Find a place where you can practice. Set that up so that you can go there every day and nothing will distract you from that commitment of going there every day. If that's not possible, then decide you're going to practice every day, even if it's sitting on a park bench or whatever it is. It's good to sit at the same time every day, but if that's not possible, never mind, just practice wherever and whenever you can. And set yourself a bottom line, a time that you practice every day, whatever is going on in your life. And set that for an amount that you can definitely achieve, which is why we say 10 minutes. 10 minutes is the time it takes you to do the washing up, I don't know, it takes 10 minutes. Make a cup of tea and drink it. Everybody can find 10 minutes in their day. Everybody and anybody can find 10 minutes in their day. So set your bottom line. Set it higher if you want to, but don't set it higher until you know you can definitely maintain that, whatever is going in your life. And then commit to that without expectation, without any desire for what the fruit of practice is going to be. Simply decide to do it, and the fruits of practice will reveal themselves. And they may be nothing like you expect them to be, but the fruits of practice are guaranteed to reveal themselves and to be of benefit to you and to the other people in your life if you practice every day. So thank you very much for listening. I hope this has been useful. If you have any questions, I know most of you aren't new to practice, but for the benefit of those who might watch it on YouTube later, if you have any questions or any issues about establishing a practice, you can always contact us at aralling@gmail.com.
Aralling Cardiff.
Oh, sorry, aralingcardiff@gmail.com, or through the Facebook page. You can always get in touch with us, and we'd be very happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you all very much. for being part of these teachings, and we wish you all very well in your practice.